Why do people who stop drinking feel worse on day 3 or 4 than they did on day 1? Most people expect the first day to be the hardest. But inside the brain, something very different is happening. The biology of alcohol withdrawal follows a timeline that catches most people completely off guard, and it has nothing to do with willpower. Understanding what is actually happening inside the brain during this window reveals why so many people give up right before the hardest part is over. So what makes day 3 or 4 so different from day 1? Alcohol works by flooding the brain's reward system with dopamine, the chemical that signals pleasure and motivation. Every drink triggers that release. Over time, the brain does not treat this as a bonus. It begins to treat it as the baseline. The brain starts producing less dopamine on its own because it has learned that alcohol will handle the job. This is why nothing feels good during this window. At the same time, another shift is happening. The brain's calming system drops, while its excitatory system rises. That imbalance is what creates the restlessness, the racing thoughts, and the feeling that your system is running too hot. This is the setup for everything that follows. The brain has quietly restructured itself around alcohol's presence. So when alcohol disappears, it is not simply missing a chemical, it is missing the entire system that chemical was propping up. But if alcohol leaves the body within the first 24 to 48 hours, why does it feel harder on day 3? Alcohol clears the bloodstream relatively quickly. By day 2, the chemical is mostly gone, but the brain's dopamine system does not recover on the same schedule. Dopamine production remains suppressed. The receptors that respond to it are still recalibrated for a higher baseline that no longer exists. This creates a gap. The alcohol is gone, but the brain has not yet learned to function without it. And that gap is exactly where people quit. During this window, several things happen at once. Mood drops, anxiety increases, sleep becomes fragmented because alcohol was suppressing REM cycles, and the brain is now swinging back in the opposite direction. The stress hormone cortisol rises. The body is not in danger, but the brain is sending signals that feel exactly like it is. What makes this period especially disorienting is the contrast. Day 1 often carries a sense of resolve, a clarity that comes with the decision to stop. That early clarity is not neurological recovery. It is simply the absence of a hangover. By day 3, the resolve is still there, but the brain chemistry has caught up, and the neurological debt comes due all at once. This is the neurological explanation for why day 3 and 4 feel so destabilizing. It is not a relapse signal, it is a recalibration signal. So why do cravings peak at exactly this moment? Cravings are not random. They are the brain attempting to solve a problem it has experienced before. Low dopamine, elevated stress, and disrupted sleep. These are the exact conditions that alcohol temporarily relieves. The brain recognizes this pattern and generates a strong urge to repeat the behavior that solved it last time. This is why people who have made it 3 or 4 days without drinking often describe feeling blindsided. They expected the hardest part to be behind them. Instead, it arrives late, and it arrives with biological force. Cravings during this window are also heavily tied to context. The brain encodes not just the chemical reward of alcohol, but the environment it was consumed in the time of evening, specific locations, social situations, even sounds and smells. These environmental triggers activate the same dopamine pathways as the substance itself. This is why a craving can appear suddenly and feel completely disconnected from any conscious decision. It was not triggered by a thought. It was triggered by a cue the brain had been trained to respond to for months or years. The craving is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is evidence that the brain is working exactly as it was trained to work. The difference is that the training is now being reversed. This window, days 3 through 5, sits inside a larger recovery arc that most people never see because they stop before it completes. After the dopamine system stabilizes, which typically begins around day 5 to 7, the brain starts upregulating its own dopamine production. Sleep architecture begins to normalize. REM sleep returns. Cortisol levels begin to drop. Energy stabilizes. But the more significant change happens over weeks and months. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and long-term planning, begins to recover function. Alcohol suppresses prefrontal activity over time, which is part of why stopping feels emotionally overwhelming. As the prefrontal cortex recovers, the emotional regulation that felt impossible in week 1 gradually returns. Research suggests that some of this prefrontal recovery is visible on brain scans within weeks of stopping. Gray matter density, which decreases with chronic alcohol use, begins to increase. The brain is not just functioning differently, it is physically rebuilding. There is also an evolutionary dimension worth understanding. The brain's reward system evolved to motivate survival behaviors, eating, movement, and social connection. Alcohol hijacks this system because it triggers the same dopamine pathways. When alcohol is removed, those pathways are temporarily underactivated. The brain has to relearn how to generate reward from natural sources. This process takes time, but it does happen, and the behaviors that accelerate it most are the ones the reward system was originally built for: physical movement, sleep, and social connection. The hardest day isn't the first. It's the day your body is clean, but your brain isn't ready yet. Most people see this as a sign to stop, but it's actually a sign that the process is working, because the system that makes day 3 feel impossible is the same system that, given enough time, rewires itself completely.